Don't bother coming back to the apartment, Vespera. I already changed the locks. That's the text Vespera received, a cold, digital slap in the face. For 2 years, she worked 2 jobs, pouring every ounce of her energy and every spare dollar into putting her boyfriend, Valerius, through school. She believed in him, in them. She was the steady ground beneath his feet while he reached for the stars. But it turns out, his stars were a little shinier than she could afford. 5 minutes ago, she was just the girl who got dumped via text. A text sent while Valerius was cruising on a yacht, cozying up to a senator's daughter. 10 minutes ago, she was the girl with a future. Now, she's the girl whose entire humiliating breakup is going viral. A video of her, stunned and heartbroken, is racking up views and laughing emojis across the internet. They say rock bottom is a solid foundation to rebuild your life on, but they conveniently forget to mention how cold and unforgiving that pavement feels when your life is being uploaded as a joke for the world to see. Most people cry when they get their hearts broken. They eat ice cream, they watch sad movies, they burn old photos. Vespera decided to break something else. Standing in front of the most expensive, ridiculously sleek car in the entire city, she hefted a heavy red brick. Her tears had dried up, replaced by a burning, white-hot rage. She wasn't just going to cry. She was going to make a statement. She was going to make someone else feel a fraction of the shattering she felt inside. So, she let the brick fly. The sound of a windshield spider-webbing into a million pieces was, for a moment, the most satisfying thing she had ever heard. But satisfaction is fleeting, especially when the owner of the car steps out of the shadows. And this wasn't just any rich guy. This was Cassian Vane, a man who doesn't just own the city's tallest buildings. He owns the night itself. His presence is electric, dangerous. He's the alpha of the most powerful, most feared pack in the state. And he just caught Vespera red-handed, with a brick in her hand and fury in her eyes, standing over the wreckage of his prized possession. He looked at the shattered glass, then at her, his expression unreadable but intensely powerful. He didn't yell. He didn't call the cops. He gave her an ultimatum, his voice a low rumble that vibrated through her very bones. Go to jail for felony vandalism, and let her public humiliation continue behind bars. Or, wear his ring. A simple, impossible choice. A prison cell, or a golden cage. Vespera, with nothing left to lose and a defiant spark still burning, chose the ring. A marriage of convenience, she thought. A way to pay off an impossible debt. But the universe has a twisted sense of humor, and this was its masterpiece. The twist that's about to turn this arrangement into the messiest, most deliciously chaotic family reunion in history. Cassian Vane, her new, powerful, and frankly terrifying husband, is Valerius's uncle. The man who cast her aside for a wealthier, more connected woman is about to get the shock of his life. Imagine the scene. The gala of the century, a glittering affair where the city's elite gather to flaunt their power and pedigree. Valerius is there, arm in arm with his new senator's daughter, preening like he's already a king. He probably expects Vespera to be at home, crying into a pint of cheap ice cream, maybe working a late shift at the diner. He certainly doesn't expect her to walk in on the arm of the most powerful man in the room. He called her his peasant ex, a nobody he was leaving behind. Now, imagine the look on his face when she's introduced not as a guest, but as his new aunt. Not just a wife, but the Luna of the very pack he's been desperately trying to lead his entire life. The position of power he craved now belongs to the woman he threw away like trash. This isn't just about revenge though. As Vespera steps into the opulent, dangerous world of the Vane family, she starts to realize her sham marriage wasn't just about a broken car. It was about something much deeper, much older. It was about a bloodline that was supposedly lost 20 years ago. It was about a secret rebellion brewing in the mountains, a faction challenging Cassian's rule. And most terrifying of all, it was about a power stirring inside her, a strange energy that's beginning to turn her eyes a lethal, glowing silver. Cassian didn't just pick a random girl off the street. He chose her for a reason. But what is it? Is she just a pawn in his intricate game of power and politics, a convenient shield against his enemies? Or is she something more? Is she the missing piece to a puzzle that could save the city, or burn it to the ground? The line between ally and enemy, between lover and captor, is blurring with every passing day. Vespera was pushed and pushed, and pushed until she had no choice but to find her own strength. But what she's discovering isn't just strength. its claws, and she's finally learning how to use them. This is the story of what happens when you push a nobody until she discovers she was a queen all along. Before we witness Vespera's first glorious shift from heartbroken victim to powerful Luna, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on all notifications. You don't want to miss a single satisfying moment of this epic revenge. Now, let's dive in.
Vespera stared at the glowing screen of her phone. The words from Valerius felt like a slap. She stood on the cold stone steps of the courthouse. The wind whipped her hair across her face. Her fingers were numb, but her chest felt like it was on fire.
Her phone buzzed again.
It was a news alert from a social media app. She tapped it. A photo filled the screen. It was Valerius. He was sitting on a yacht. His arm was draped around a girl with perfect blonde hair and a designer dress. The caption read, "Finally traded my old copper for a gold bar." Vespera felt a sob rise in her throat. She swallowed it down. She had spent 3 years supporting Valerius. She had worked 2 jobs so he could finish his degree. Now that he was the heir to a fortune, he was throwing her out like trash. "Ves, are you okay?" It was her friend Lyra on the line. Lyra sounded breathless and worried. "I am fine," Vespera said. Her voice sounded hollow. "Don't check the comments," Lyra warned. "People are being mean. They are calling you a placeholder. They say you were just a tool he used to get to the top." Vespera didn't listen. She scrolled down. She saw her own comment from 10 minutes ago. She had asked him why he was doing this. Valerius had replied, "I don't owe anything to a girl who smells like a fast food kitchen. Go back to the gutter, Vespera." Vespera turned her phone off. She looked at the parking lot. She saw the expensive cars of the lawyers and the businessmen. One car stood out. It was a matte black BMW. It looked like a shark waiting in the water. She looked at the ground. A heavy red brick lay near the curb. A strange, cold calm settled over her. She picked up the brick. It was rough and heavy in her hand. Vespera walked toward the black car. She didn't look around to see if anyone was watching. She raised the brick and slammed it into the windshield. The sound of shattering glass was the most beautiful thing she had heard all day. She did it again and again. She stayed there even when the car alarm began to scream. A few minutes later, the courthouse doors swung open. A man walked out. He was tall and wore a suit that probably cost more than Vespera's life. He had dark hair and eyes that glowed like amber. He stopped when he saw the girl standing next to his ruined car. "Did you do this?" the man asked. His voice was deep. It felt like a physical weight in the air. Vespera didn't flinch.
"Yes,
I did." The man looked at the glass. Then he looked at her. He didn't look angry. He looked curious. "Do you have any idea how much this car costs, little girl?" "I don't have a penny," Vespera said. She took a step toward him. "But I can warm your bed until the debt is paid." The man tilted his head. He walked closer. Vespera could smell him now. He smelled like expensive wood and something wild. Something like a predator. "You have a lot of guts," the man said. He reached out and touched her chin. His fingers were warm. "I am Cassian. And I don't need a girl in my bed. I need a wife to stop my board of directors from breathing down my neck." Vespera's heart hammered against her ribs.
a wife."
"Marry me," Cassian said. "And the debt is gone. You get my name. I get my peace." Vespera felt a surge of fear. She pushed his hand away. "I am not for sale. I am not trading one man for another." Cassian shrugged. He didn't seem bothered by her refusal. "The police will be here in 5 minutes. You can go to jail for this. Or you can take my card." He pulled a gold-edged card from his pocket. He tucked it into the front pocket of her worn jacket. "Call me when you realize the world is a cold place for a girl with nothing," Cassian said. He climbed into a different black SUV that had just pulled up. His guards closed the door. Vespera watched him drive away. She felt the heavy weight of the gold card against her chest. "I will never call you," Vespera whispered to the empty air. Vespera arrived at her hostel an hour later. Her bags were already sitting on the sidewalk. They were soaked from the light rain. "You can't stay here," the hostel manager said through the cracked door. "We saw the news." We saw what your boyfriend posted. This is a respectable place. We don't want the drama. It wasn't my fault, Vespera shouted. He lied. The door slammed shut. Vespera dragged her heavy bags down the street. She headed for a shelter home. It was her last hope. But when she walked inside, the room went quiet. A girl in the corner held up a phone. She was laughing. Hey, everyone. Look who it is. It's the girl Valerius dumped. I guess the trash finally found its way back to the dumpster. Vespera tried to ignore them. She went to the front desk. But the manager there looked at her phone, and then at Vespera. I am sorry, the manager said. But we are full. And we don't need people filming videos inside here. You have to leave. Vespera walked back out into the cold. She sat on her suitcase on the pavement. She pulled out her phone. She had no money. No friends. Everyone she knew was a friend of Valerius. And they were all laughing at her. She reached into her pocket. Her fingers brushed the gold card. Vespera looked at the name. Cassian Vane. She didn't have a choice. She dialed the number. Where are you? Cassian's voice was clear and calm. He didn't sound surprised that she was calling. Vespera told him the address of the shelter. Stay there, Cassian said. Don't move. In 10 minutes, a car pulled up. It was longer and more expensive than any car Vespera had ever seen. The driver got out. He was a large man with a scar over his eye. He bowed to Vespera. Miss Vespera? Master Cassian sent me. Please get in. Vespera climbed into the back seat. The leather felt soft. The car smelled like cedar.
Her phone rang.
It was a text from Cassian. Follow my driver. We have a lot to talk about. The car drove through the city. They left the dirty streets and the small apartments behind. They drove up a hill where the houses looked like castles. They stopped in front of a massive gate. 2 rows of men stood at the entrance. They were all wearing black suits. They all looked strong and dangerous. When the car stopped, a butler opened the door. He was an older man with white hair and a kind face. Welcome, Miss Vespera, the butler said. Master Cassian is waiting for you in the lounge. Please follow me. Vespera walked into the house. The floors were made of white marble. The ceilings were so high she had to tilt her head back to see them. She felt small. She felt like a stray cat that had been invited into a tiger's den. She saw Cassian sitting on a leather sofa. He was reading a file. He looked up when she entered. He closed the file and stood up. You look like you've had a long day, Cassian said. Why are you doing this? Vespera asked. She didn't sit down. You don't even know me. I know enough, Cassian said. I know you have nothing left. And I know you have the fire to break a man's car when he makes you mad.
I like 4.
Vespera looked at the luxury around her. I won't be your toy, Cassian. I don't want a toy, Cassian replied. I want a partner. My family is a pack of wolves, Vespera. They want my seat. They want my power. If I have a wife, they can't challenge my status as the alpha. It's business. That is all. Vespera looked at the ring on his finger. It was a crest of a wolf. If I do this, Vespera said, I want something in return. Anything, Cassian said. I want Valerius to regret the day he ever met me, Vespera said. Her voice was cold. Cassian smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. It was the smile of a hunter who had just found a new weapon. I think we can make that happen, Cassian said. Vespera sat on the edge of the velvet chair. She felt out of place in the massive lounge. Cassian stood by the window. The moonlight caught his eyes. They looked almost orange. I have decided, Vespera said. Her voice was stronger now. I will marry you, but I have a condition. Cassian turned around. He looked amused. A condition? You are sitting in my house because you have nowhere else to go. But please, tell me. I will not share a bed with you, Vespera said. This is a business deal. I am a shield for your reputation. I am not a real wife. Cassian let out a short laugh. He walked toward her. He stopped just a few inches away. Vespera felt the heat radiating off him. He was much larger than Valerius. He felt like a mountain of pure muscle. Weren't you the one in the parking lot? Cassian asked. You offered to warm my bed to pay for a window. Now you are acting like a shy flower? Vespera stood up. She did not back away. That was a moment of madness. This is a contract. Do you agree or not? Cassian stared at her for a long moment. He seemed to be looking deep into her soul. Finally, he nodded. I agree, Cassian said. I don't need a woman who doesn't want to be there. I need a woman who can stand by my side without flinching. He turned to the door and raised his voice. Silas, bring everyone to the Great Hall.
Now.
Vespera followed him into a room that looked like a throne room. Within minutes, dozens of people lined the walls. There were maids, guards, and drivers. They all looked at Vespera with wide eyes. Cassian stepped in front of Vespera. He didn't say a word to the staff. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a ring. It was a heavy silver band with a black diamond. He dropped to one knee. The room went silent. Vespera felt her heart skip a beat. She knew this was a performance, but it felt terrifyingly real. Vespera, Cassian said. His voice carried to every corner of the room. Will you be my Luna? Will you rule this house and this pack with me? Vespera looked at the faces of the staff. They looked shocked. They looked at her like she was a miracle. She realized then that Cassian was telling a lie to protect his pride. His previous fiancée had run away. He was using Vespera to show the world he couldn't be humiliated. I will, Vespera whispered. Cassian slid the ring onto her finger. It was heavy. It felt like power. He stood up and leaned in close. He didn't kiss her lips. He pressed a firm, lingering kiss against her forehead. Now they know, Cassian whispered against her skin. You belong to the Alpha. No one can touch you. He turned to his head guard. I have to go to the office. The board is meeting tonight. Show the Luna to the master suite. Feed her. If she wants anything, she gets it. Cassian left without a backward glance. Vespera was led up a grand staircase. The room they gave her was larger than her entire hostel. She ate a meal of roasted lamb and expensive wine. She felt like she was dreaming. After dinner, she wandered through the halls. She wanted to know more about the man she had just married. She entered a small library filled with old books. On a side table, she saw a photo frame. Vespera picked it up. Her hands started to shake. In the photo, Cassian was standing next to a younger man. They were both laughing. The younger man was Valerius.
No, Vespera, breathe.
A maid entered the room to turn down the lights. Vespera hid her shaking hands behind her back. Who is this? Vespera asked. She pointed to Valerius in the photo. She tried to sound like she was just curious. The maid smiled. That is Master Valerius, Mississippi. He is the master's only nephew. Master Cassian raised him like a son after his parents died. Vespera felt like the floor was falling away. She had married the uncle of the man who had ruined her life. She was now the aunt of the man she hated most in the world. Does he come here often? Vespera asked. Oh, yes, miss, the maid said. He is the heir to the Vane fortune. He will be at the gala tomorrow night to celebrate the wedding announcement. Vespera looked back at the photo. Valerius looked so happy. He had no idea. He thought he had thrown Vespera into the gutter. He had no idea he had actually thrown her into the arms of the only man he feared. Vespera gripped the edge of the table. A dark, sharp smile touched her lips. I can't wait to see him, Vespera said. You look like you are ready to start a war. Vespera turned away from the mirror as Cassian walked into the dressing room. He was wearing a tuxedo that fit his broad shoulders perfectly. He looked like the king of a dark world. Vespera smoothed the fabric of her dress. It was made of deep red silk that looked like spilled wine. It was tight and elegant. It made her look expensive. It made her look dangerous. I am starting a war, Vespera said. I just want to make sure I have enough bullets. Cassian walked closer. He reached into a velvet box on the table and pulled out a necklace. It was a string of diamonds that caught the light like fire. He stood behind her and draped it around her neck. His fingers brushed her skin. Vespera felt a shiver run down her spine that had nothing to do with the cold. You have my name, Cassian whispered near her ear. That is the only bullet you need. Tonight, you are not the girl from the hostel. You are the woman who owns this city. He fastened the clasp. The weight of the diamonds felt heavy against her throat. Does Valerius know I am here? Vespera asked. No, Cassian said. He stepped back and met her eyes in the mirror. I told him I had a surprise for the family. He thinks I am announcing a new business merger. He has no idea his new aunt is the woman he tried to bury. Vespera took a deep breath. She looked at her reflection. Her hair was swept up. Her lips were painted a bold red. She didn't recognize herself. She looked like a predator. Let's go, Vespera said. The gala was held in the grand ballroom of the Vane Plaza. The room was filled with the elite of the city. Wealthy families and pack leaders stood in circles. They drank champagne and talked about power. When the doors opened, the room went silent. Cassian led Vespera down the stairs. He kept his hand firmly on the small of her back. He walked with the confidence of a man who owned everything he saw. Vespera kept her head high. She felt the eyes of every woman in the room on her dress. She felt the eyes of every man on her face. At the bottom of the stairs, a group of young men were laughing. In the center of them was Valerius. He was holding a glass of scotch. He looked happy. He looked like a man who didn't have a care in the world. He hadn't seen them yet. Wait here, Cassian said softly to Vespera. I will call you over in a moment. Vespera watched as Cassian walked toward his nephew. The crowd parted for the alpha. Valerius grinned when he saw his uncle. He clapped Cassian on the shoulder. Uncle, you finally made it, Valerius said. His voice was loud and arrogant. I was telling the guys about the merger. Is that what the big secret is? Are we buying out the competition? Cassian smiled. It was a cold, sharp smile. In a way. But I didn't come here to talk about business. I came here to introduce the family to the new Luna. Valerius laughed. The new Luna? You? The man who said he would never marry again? Who is she? Some princess from the European packs. She is right here, Cassian said. He turned and gestured toward the shadows where Vespera stood. Vespera, come here. Vespera stepped out of the shadows. She walked slowly. The click of her heels on the marble floor sounded like a countdown. Valerius turned around. The grin was still on his face. He looked at her feet. Then her dress. Then her face. The glass in his hand slipped. The sound of the scotch glass shattering on the floor was like a gunshot. Valerius turned pale. He looked like he had just seen a ghost. Vespera, he choked out. He took a step back, tripping over his own feet. What? What are you doing here? Vespera stopped right in front of him. She looked at the spilled drink on his shoes. Then she looked him directly in the eye. Is that any way to speak to your Aunt Valerius? Vespera asked. The silence in the ballroom was heavy. It felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. Valerius stood with his mouth hanging open. He looked at the diamonds on Vespera's neck. He looked at Cassian's hand, which was now resting possessively on her waist. Uncle, this is a joke, Valerius finally stammered. He tried to force a laugh, but it sounded like a cough. You can't be serious. Do you even know who this girl is? Cassian's eyes darkened. The amber glow in them became a deep, predatory gold. I know exactly who she is. She is the woman I chose. She is your Luna. Valerius stepped forward. He ignored the warning growl that started deep in Cassian's chest. She's a nobody. She's an orphan who worked in a diner. I only dated her because I felt sorry for her. She's a gold digger, uncle. She probably broke your car just to get your attention. The crowd began to murmur. Octavia, the girl from the yacht, stepped out from behind Valerius. She looked Vespera up and down with a look of pure disgust. It's true, Octavia said. Her voice was high and sharp. Valerius told me all about her. She's obsessed with him. She's probably using you to get back at him, Mr. Vane. Vespera felt the old familiar sting of shame. For a second, she felt like the girl on the sidewalk again. But then she felt the heat of Cassian's body next to her. She felt the weight of the black diamond on her finger. Vespera didn't scream. She didn't cry. She took a slow sip of her champagne and looked at Octavia. You must be Octavia, Vespera said. Her voice was calm and smooth. Valerius told me about you, too. He said you were a great placeholder until he found someone with actual class. Octavia's face turned bright red. She gasped and looked at Valerius. You said what? I never said that, Valerius shouted. He turned back to Cassian. Uncle, listen to me. She is dangerous. She is a liar. You have to kick her out before she ruins our family name. Cassian moved so fast that the human guests didn't even see him shift. One moment he was standing by Vespera. The next he was inches away from Valerius. He was much taller than his nephew. He looked down at him like a king looking at a bug. You're speaking about my wife, Cassian said. His voice was a low, terrifying rumble. In my house. In front of my guests. But, uncle. Enough. Cassian's voice boomed through the ballroom. Several guests jumped. You have been spoiled, Valerius. You think that because you are my heir, you can treat people like toys. You think you can throw away a woman like Vespera and then insult her when she rises higher than you. Cassian turned to the crowd. Let it be known. Vespera is the Luna of the Silverback Pack. Anyone who insults her, insults me. Anyone who treats her as less than a queen will answer to my claws. He looked back at Valerius. Apologize.
Now.
Valerius looked around the room. He saw his friends looking away. He saw the powerful pack leaders nodding in agreement with Cassian. He looked at Vespera. She was standing tall. She looked beautiful. She looked untouchable.
I'm sorry, Valerius muttered.
He looked at the floor. I didn't hear you, Vespera said. Valerius gritted his teeth. He looked up, and his eyes were full of hate. I am sorry, Aunt Vespera. The words tasted like poison in his mouth. Apology accepted, Vespera said. She turned to Cassian and smiled. Shall we dance, husband? Cassian led her to the center of the floor. The orchestra began to play a slow, dark waltz. He pulled her close. Their bodies moved together in perfect rhythm. You did well, Cassian whispered. He hates me even more now, Vespera replied. She looked over Cassian's shoulder. She saw Valerius storming out of the ballroom. Good, Cassian said. A man who is angry makes mistakes. And I want to see how many mistakes he makes when he realizes I am changing my will tomorrow. Vespera pulled back to look at him. You're cutting him off? I'm giving everything to my wife, Cassian said. He spun her around. Unless, of course, we have an heir of our own one day. Vespera's heart raced. This wasn't just about a car window anymore. This was about a kingdom. But as the dance ended, Vespera saw a shadow by the balcony. A man she didn't recognize was watching her. He wasn't a guest. He had a scar across his throat and eyes that looked like cold gray stone. He wasn't looking at Cassian. He was looking at Vespera. The man tapped his watch and disappeared into the night. He's gone to the bar to drink away his pride. You can stop holding your breath now. Vespera turned as Cassian spoke. They were standing on the stone balcony, overlooking the moonlit gardens. The music from the gala was a faint hum behind them. The cold air felt good against her skin. It washed away the cloying scent of expensive perfume and lies. I didn't realize I was holding it, Vespera said. She touched the diamonds at her throat. Does he really lose everything? The inheritance, the title. Cassian leaned against the stone railing. He looked out at the dark trees of his estate. Valerius is a pup who thinks he is a wolf. He needs to learn that power is not a birthright. It is earned. By standing up to him, you earn more respect from the pack than he has in 10 years. Vespera looked down at her hands. The black diamond glittered. I just wanted him to feel small. I didn't think about the rest of it. That is why you are dangerous, Vespera, Cassian said. He stepped closer. The heat from his body acted like a shield against the wind. You don't seek power. You seek justice. That makes you much harder to buy. He reached out as if to touch her cheek, but he stopped. His head tilted. His nostrils flared. Stay here, Cassian commanded.
His voice had changed.
It was no longer the voice of a businessman. It was the growl of a predator who had caught a scent. What is it? Vespera asked. The wind changed, Cassian said. I'll be back. Do not leave this balcony. He vanished into the shadows of the garden with a speed that made Vespera's head spin. She stood alone in the dark. The silence of the woods felt heavy. She turned to go back inside, but a movement near the rose bushes caught her eye. It was the man with the gray eyes and the scarred throat. He wasn't running. He was standing perfectly still, watching her. Vespera's heart hammered against her ribs. "Who are you?" The man didn't answer. He stepped into the light of the moon. He held up a small, crumpled piece of paper. He flicked it onto the balcony floor and then disappeared into the trees just as the sound of Cassian's heavy boots returned. Cassian vaulted over the railing, his eyes glowing a bright, angry gold. He looked around the empty balcony. "Did you see anyone?" Cassian demanded. Vespera stepped on the paper, hiding it under her heel. She didn't know why she did it. It was an instinct, a need to have a secret of her own in a house full of wolves.
No, Vespera lid.
"I thought I saw a bird. That was all." Cassian narrowed his eyes. He sniffed the air again. Strange. The scent was old, like a ghost. He took her hand.
Come.
"The guests are leaving. It is time for you to see the rest of your new home." Later that night, in the safety of her massive bathroom, Vespera locked the door. She pulled the crumpled paper from her pocket. The writing was jagged and hurried. "The Alpha is a liar. He didn't pick you for your fire. He picked you because of who your mother was. Ask him about the 19th of May. Vespera felt a chill that went deeper than the night air. Her mother had died in a car accident when Vespera was 5. She had no memories of her family. She was just an orphan from a small town. How could Cassian know her mother? A loud crash from the hallway made her jump. She hid the note in her silk robe and opened the door. Valerius was standing in the hall. He was swaying on his feet. He smelled like expensive scotch and bitter rage. He had kicked over a priceless vase, and the glass lay in pieces around his boots. "You think you won," Valerius hissed. He pointed a shaking finger at her. "You think you can just walk into my house and take my life? You're a stray, Vespera. A mistake." "Go to bed, Valerius," Vespera said. She tried to sound brave, but her voice wavered. "You're drunk." "I'm smart," Valerius said. He stepped over the broken glass. He looked like a man who had lost his mind. "Uncle Cassian thinks he's so strong. But he has a weakness. He's obsessed with his legacy. He's obsessed with the past." Valerius leaned in. He was close enough that Vespera could see the bloodshot veins in his eyes. "I know what you are," Valerius whispered. "And soon the whole pack will know. You won't be the Luna. You'll be the sacrifice." He let out a jagged laugh and stumbled toward his room at the end of the wing. Vespera stood in the dark hallway. She looked at the closed door of Cassian's study. The light was still on. She thought about the note. She thought about Valerius's threat. She realized she wasn't just a wife or a shield. She was a piece in a game she didn't understand. She walked toward Cassian's door. She needed to know the truth. But before she could knock, she heard Cassian's voice. He was on the phone. "I don't care what it costs," Cassian was saying. His voice was cold and lethal. "Keep the scouts on the border. If the gray-eyed man comes within a mile of Vespera, kill him. She belongs to the Vane pack now. She cannot find out why she is really here." Vespera pulled her hand back. She retreated into the shadows. She wasn't a queen. She was a prisoner. The sun had not yet risen when Vespera crept out of her room. The mansion was silent. Even the guards seemed like statues in the dim light. She kept the mysterious note pressed against her palm. May 19th. She needed to find the family archives. Silas had mentioned a basement library where the pack kept its history. If Cassian was hiding something about her mother, that was where the truth lived. She found the heavy oak doors at the end of a cold stone hallway. They were locked. Vespera didn't have a key, but she had something else. She pulled a small hairpins from her hair. 3 years with Valerius had taught her how to get into places she wasn't wanted. With a soft click, the lock turned. The air inside the archive smelled like dust and old leather. Rows of leather-bound ledgers stretched into the shadows. Vespera grabbed a flashlight from a nearby desk and began to scan the labels. 1990, 2000, 2010. She stopped at the year she turned 5. The year of the accident. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she pulled the heavy book from the shelf. She flipped through the pages. Most of it was boring business. Land deals. Pact disputes. Then she reached the month of May. There was an entry for May 19th. It wasn't a business deal. It was a birth record. But the name next to it wasn't Vespera. It was a name she had never heard. Cassian Vane. Born to the high alpha. Status. True blood. Vespera frowned. Valerius was the only heir. Who was Cassian? She turned the page, and a loose photograph fell out. It was a photo of a woman. She was standing in front of this very mansion. She had the same sharp jawline as Vespera. She had the same dark, curly hair. But her eyes were not human. They were a bright, glowing silver. Behind the woman stood a young man. It was Cassian. He looked happy. He was looking at the woman like she was his entire world. "What are you doing here?" Vespera screamed and dropped the book. The flashlight rolled across the floor, painting the room in dizzying circles of light. Cassian was standing in the doorway. He wasn't wearing his suit. He wore a simple black shirt that showed the scars on his arms. His eyes were not happy now. They were full of a cold, dangerous fire. "Asked you a question, Vespera," Cassian said. He stepped into the room. The door slammed shut behind him without him touching it. Vespera scrambled to pick up the photo. Who is she? Who is the woman in this picture? Cassian reached her in 2 steps. He snatched the photo from her hand. His fingers were trembling. "This is none of your concern. You were told to stay in the suite." "It is my concern," Vespera shouted. "The man with the gray eyes left me a note. He told me to ask you about May 19th. He said you lied to me." Cassian's face went pale. He gripped the photo so hard it began to crinkle. "The man with the gray eyes? You talked to him?" "He left a note," Vespera hissed. "He said you didn't pick me because of my fire. He said you picked me because of my mother." "Is this her? Was my mother a Vane?" Cassian didn't answer. He turned away and slammed his fist into a bookshelf. The wood splintered. "Your mother was the princess of a silverback pack," Cassian growled. He turned back to her. His eyes were fully gold now. "She was my sister. And you are not my wife because I wanted to shield Vespera. You are my wife because it is the only way to keep the other packs from killing you for your blood." Vespera felt the world spin. "Your sister? If she was your sister, then that means—" "It means you are the rightful alpha," Cassian said. "And it means Valerius has been trying to kill you since the moment you were born." A loud alarm began to wail throughout the mansion. The red emergency lights started to flash. "They're here," Cassian whispered. He grabbed Vespera's arm. "The gray-eyed man didn't come to warn you. He came to track you." The sound of shattering glass echoed from the floors above. The hunt had begun. "Stay behind me and do not let go of my jacket." Cassian's voice was no longer human. It was a vibrating growl that shook the very air in the small archive room. He shoved Vespera into a corner and stood before her. His muscles were expanding. The fabric of his black shirt ripped at the seams. The ceiling above them groaned. A second later, the floorboards of the lounge upstairs collapsed. 3 men in tactical gear dropped into the basement. They weren't holding guns. They were holding silver-tipped spears. "The girl comes with us," Cassian, one of the men, shouted. He had a gray mask over his face. "The council won't let a half-breed sit on the throne." Cassian didn't talk. He roared. He lunged at the men with a speed that blurred Vespera's vision. He was a whirlwind of claws and teeth. He wasn't just a man anymore. He was a beast in a tailored suit. Vespera watched in horror as one of the men swung a spear. The silver tip sliced through Cassian's shoulder. Smoke rose from the wound. Cassian winced, but didn't stop. He threw the man against a stone pillar with enough force to crack the rock. "Run, Vespera," Cassian shouted over his shoulder. Blood was dripping from his arm. "The secret tunnel behind the shelf. Go to the woods." Vespera looked at the shelf. She looked at Cassian. She couldn't leave him, but she knew she was the target. If she stayed, he would die trying to protect her. She grabbed the heavy ledger and sprinted toward the shelf. She found an iron lever hidden behind a row of books. She pulled it. A section of the wall swung open, revealing a dark, damp tunnel. She scrambled inside just as a second wave of attackers dropped into the room. The tunnel was narrow and smelled like old rain. Vespera ran until her lungs felt like they were filled with broken glass. She could hear the sounds of fighting fading behind her. She could hear the distant howls of wolves. She burst out of the tunnel and into the cold night air. She was deep in the forest. The trees were thick. The moon was a giant silver eye in the sky. Vespera stopped to catch her breath. She looked at the moon. A strange heat started to build in her chest. It wasn't the heat of running. It was a burning, itching sensation under her skin. I found her. Vespera turned. Valerius stepped out from behind a massive oak tree. He wasn't wearing a tuxedo anymore. He was shirtless. His skin was pale in the moonlight. He looked at her with eyes that were full of madness. "You really thought my uncle could save you?" Valerius asked. He laughed, but it sounded like a bark. "He's a fool. He loved my mother so much he couldn't see the truth. You're a curse, Vespera, and I'm the one who gets to end it." Valerius began to change. His bones snapped and reformed. His face elongated into a snout. His fur was a sickly, mottled brown. He was a smaller wolf than Cassian, but he was fast. He snarled and lunged at her throat. Vespera fell back into the dirt. She put her hands up to protect her face.
No,
she thought. I won't die in the dirt. Not today. The heat in her chest exploded. It felt like her blood had turned into molten silver. A scream tore out of her throat, but it didn't sound human. Her fingernails turned into sharp, ivory claws. Her vision shifted into shades of gray and heat. The pain was everywhere, but it felt like a homecoming. She didn't wait for Valerius to bite. She felt a power she had never known. She lunged forward. Valerius, in his wolf form, skidded to a halt. His ears flattened against his head. He whimpered. Vespera looked down at her own paws. They were covered in fur as white as the moon. She wasn't a brown wolf like the others. She was glowing. She stood over Valerius and let out a howl that echoed across the entire valley. It was a command. It was a threat. Valerius turned and fled into the dark. He was terrified of what she had become. Vespera tried to take a step, but the world started to tilt. The shift had taken everything she had. She collapsed onto the mossy ground. As her vision faded, she saw a pair of boots walk toward her. Not tactical boots. Not Cassian's boots. It was the man with the gray eyes. He knelt beside her and touched her white fur. Finally, the man whispered, "The White Queen is back. Now the real war begins. Stay behind me and do not let go of my jacket." Cassian's voice was no longer human. It was a vibrating growl that shook the very air in the small archive room. He shoved Vespera into a corner and stood before her. His muscles were expanding. The fabric of his black shirt ripped at the seams. The ceiling above them groaned. A second later, the floorboards of the lounge upstairs collapsed. 3 men in tactical gear dropped into the basement. They weren't holding guns. They were holding silver-tipped spears. "The girl comes with us, Cassian," one of the men shouted. He had a gray mask over his face. "The council won't let a half-breed sit on the throne." Cassian didn't talk. He roared. He lunged at the men with a speed that blurred Vespera's vision. He was a whirlwind of claws and teeth. He wasn't just a man anymore. He was a beast in a tailored suit. Vespera watched in horror as one of the men swung a spear. The silver tip sliced through Cassian's shoulder. Smoke rose from the wound. Cassian winced but didn't stop. He threw the man against a stone pillar with enough force to crack the rock. "Run, Vespera!" Cassian shouted over his shoulder. Blood was dripping from his arm. The secret tunnel behind the shelf. "Go to the woods." Vespera looked at the shelf. She looked at Cassian. She couldn't leave him, but she knew she was the target. If she stayed, he would die trying to protect her. She grabbed the heavy ledger and sprinted toward the shelf. She found an iron lever hidden behind a row of books. She pulled it. A section of the wall swung open, revealing a dark, damp tunnel. She scrambled inside just as a second wave of attackers dropped into the room. The tunnel was narrow and smelled like old rain. Vespera ran until her lungs felt like they were filled with broken glass. She could hear the sounds of fighting fading behind her. She could hear the distant howls of wolves. She burst out of the tunnel and into the cold night air. She was deep in the forest. The trees were thick. The moon was a giant silver eye in the sky. Vespera stopped to catch her breath. She looked at the moon. A strange heat started to build in her chest. It wasn't the heat of running. It was a burning, itching sensation under her skin. I found her. Vespera turned. Valerius stepped out from behind a massive oak tree. He wasn't wearing a tuxedo anymore. He was shirtless. His skin was pale in the moonlight. He looked at her with eyes that were full of madness. "You really thought my uncle could save you?" Valerius asked. He laughed, but it sounded like a bark. "He's a fool. He loved my mother so much he couldn't see the truth. You're a curse, Vespera. And I'm the one who gets to end it." Valerius began to change. His bones snapped and reformed. His face elongated into a snout. His fur was a sickly, mottled brown. He was a smaller wolf than Cassian, but he was fast. He snarled and lunged at her throat. Vespera fell back into the dirt. She put her hands up to protect her face. "No," she thought. "I won't die in the dirt. Not today." The heat in her chest exploded. It felt like her blood had turned into molten silver. A scream tore out of her throat, but it didn't sound human. Her fingernails turned into sharp, ivory claws. Her vision shifted into shades of gray and heat. The pain was everywhere, but it felt like a homecoming. She didn't wait for Valerius to bite. She felt a power she had never known. She lunged forward. Valerius, in his wolf form, skidded to a halt. His ears flattened against his head. He whimpered. Vespera looked down at her own paws. They were covered in fur as white as the moon. She wasn't a brown wolf like the others. She was glowing. She stood over Valerius and let out a howl that echoed across the entire valley. It was a command. It was a threat. Valerius turned and fled into the dark. He was terrified of what she had become. Vespera tried to take a step, but the world started to tilt. The shift had taken everything she had. She collapsed onto the mossy ground. As her vision faded, she saw a pair of boots walk toward her. Not tactical boots. Not Cassian's boots. It was the man with the gray eyes. He knelt beside her and touched her white fur. Finally, the man whispered, "The White Queen is back. Now the real war begins." The smell of pine needles and wood smoke was the first thing that brought Vespera back to the world. She tried to open her eyes, but her eyelids felt like lead. Her body ached in places she didn't know existed. Every muscle felt like it had been pulled apart and sewn back together with hot wire. She was no longer on the mossy forest floor. She felt the scratchy texture of a wool blanket beneath her. A fire crackled nearby, casting a flickering orange glow against her closed lids. "You should stay still," a voice said. It was a low, sandpaper voice. It was the man with the gray eyes. Vespera's eyes snapped open. She tried to sit up, but a wave of dizziness slammed into her. She was in a small, circular cabin made of rough logs. The man sat on a wooden stool across from her, sharpening a long silver blade. The scar on his throat looked like a jagged white snake in the firelight. "Where is Cassian?" Vespera whispered. Her throat felt raw, as if she had been screaming for hours. "The Alpha is busy holding his throne," the man replied. He didn't look up from his knife. "The council used the attack on the mansion as an excuse to declare martial law. They are calling you a traitor who brought an enemy to the gates." Vespera gripped the edge of the blanket. She looked at her hands. They were human again, but she could still feel the phantom weight of the claws. She remembered the feeling of the white fur. She remembered the terror in Valerius's eyes. "Who are you?" Vespera asked. "And why did you call me a queen?" The man finally looked up. His gray eyes were cold, but there was a flicker of something like respect in them. He stood up and walked toward her. He didn't move like a guard or a businessman. He moved like a shadow. "My name is Silas," the man said. Vespera frowned.
No.
Silas is Cassian's butler. An old man. That man is a decoy, Silas said. He sat on the edge of the cot. I am the real Silas. I was your mother's protector. I am the one who took you to that orphanage 20 years ago to save you from your uncle's ambition. Vespera shook her head. Cassian told me he wanted to protect me. He said my mother was his sister. She was, Silas said. He leaned in, his voice dropping to a whisper. But she wasn't just his sister. She was the white wolf. In our pack, the white wolf is the true leader. The one with the power to unite all the fractured families. When she died, that power was supposed to go to you. Cassian knew that. He didn't marry you to protect you, Vespera. He married you to keep your blood under his control. Vespera felt a cold stone drop in her stomach. He lied to me again. He is a Vane, Silas said. They all lie. Even now, he is probably hunting for you. Not to save you, but to make sure you don't find the rest of us. The rest of who? Vespera asked. Silas stood and walked to the door of the cabin. He threw it open. Outside, the sun was just beginning to rise over a hidden valley. Vespera saw dozens of tents and small cabins. There were men and women moving about, sharpening weapons and training. They all stopped when they saw her. One by one, they dropped to their knees. This is the rebellion, Silas said. The wolves who were exiled by Cassian and the council. We have been waiting 20 years for a white wolf to lead us back to the city. Vespera looked at the people. They looked tired. They looked hungry. But they looked at her as if she were a goddess. I don't know how to lead anyone, Vespera said. I just learned how to turn into a dog last night. You are not a dog, Silas said. He stepped aside as a woman approached. She was carrying a bundle of clothes, white silk and black leather. You are the moon made flesh. And tonight, we are going to take back what is yours. A loud howl echoed from the ridges above the valley. It wasn't a howl of greeting.
It was a war cry.
They found us, Silas growled. He grabbed his silver blade. Cassian scouts. They must have followed my scent. Vespera stood up. Her legs were shaky, but the heat began to stir in her chest again. She looked at the white clothes. She looked at the people waiting for her command. She realized she had spent her whole life being pushed around. By the orphanage. By Valerius. By Cassian. She was done being a pawn. Give me the leather, Vespera said. Her voice was steady now. And show me how to use a sword. If Cassian wants his wife back, he's going to have to fight for her. The cold mountain air bit at Vespera's skin as she swung the practice sword. It was made of heavy wood, but it felt like lead in her aching hands. Silas stood across from her. He hadn't broken a sweat. Every time she lunged, he stepped aside with the grace of a ghost. Again, Silas commanded. You are thinking like a human, Vespera. You are waiting for the strike. A wolf knows the strike is coming before the enemy even moves. Vespera wiped sweat from her forehead. Her white leather tunic was stained with dust. I've been a human for 20 years, Silas. It's a hard habit to break. You don't have 20 years, Silas said. He swung his own wooden blade. It whistled through the air and stopped an inch from her throat. Cassian's army is moving. They have crossed the Black River. They will be at the base of this mountain by nightfall. Vespera looked past him toward the camp. The rebels were packing crates of silver-tipped arrows. Children were being led into the deep caves for safety. This wasn't just a story or a secret anymore. This was a war. And she was the banner they were fighting under. Why did Cassian do it? Vespera asked, lowering her sword. If I am his sister's daughter, why not just tell me? Why the fake marriage? Silas lowered his weapon. His gray eyes softened for a brief second. Because a niece can be a rival, but a wife is a possession. By law, the Alpha's wife cannot challenge his rule. By marrying you, he locked your power in a box and threw away the key. Vespera felt a surge of cold fury. Every touch, every protective word from Cassian had been a shackle. He didn't see a woman. He saw a legal loophole. I want to be ready, Vespera said. She gripped the sword until her knuckles turned white. Show me how to lead them. Silas spent the next few hours teaching her the layout of the mountain. He showed her the narrow passes where they could trap Cassian's heavier vehicles. He showed her the scent trails they could use to confuse the enemy wolves. As the sun began to set, a young rebel named Kale ran up to them. He was pale and out of breath. "Silas, the perimeter has been breached," Kale shouted. "But it's not the army. It's a messenger. He's carrying a white flag." Vespera followed Silas to the edge of the camp. Standing in the clearing was a man she recognized. It was the driver who had first picked her up from the shelter. He looked tired and battered. "I have a message for the Luna," the driver said. He looked at Vespera and for a moment, he bowed his head. "Master Cassian asks for a parley. He is alone at the old bridge." "It's a trap," Silas hissed. He reached for his blade. "He wants to lure you out so he can finish what the council started." Vespera looked at the driver. She remembered how he had treated her with respect when she had nothing. "He said he is alone?" Vespera asked. "He is," the driver replied. "He said to tell you that the 19th of May was not the only secret your mother kept." Vespera felt her heart stop. There was more. "I'm going," Vespera said. "Vespera, no." "The 19th of May was the day your mother died," Cassian said softly. "But she didn't die in an accident, Vespera. She was killed by the man you are currently following. Silas didn't save you from me. He kidnapped you to use you as a weapon for his own rebellion. I spent 20 years and millions of dollars trying to find you." Vespera's world tilted. "You're lying. He's been protecting the exiles." "He created the exiles," Cassian shouted. He pointed back toward the mountain. "He killed the High Alpha and blamed me. He wants the White Wolf because only a White Wolf can open the Great Vault beneath the city. He doesn't want a queen, Vespera. He wants a key." Suddenly, a silver arrow whistled through the air. It struck the stone inches from Cassian's foot. Vespera turned. Silas was standing on the ridge above them. He wasn't alone. He had 20 archers with him. All of them had their bows drawn. "Step away from him, Vespera," Silas yelled. His face was twisted in a mask of rage. "He's poisoning your mind." Vespera looked at Cassian. Then she looked at Silas. Both men claimed to be her savior. Both men had lied to her. "Both of you be quiet," Vespera screamed. She felt the silver heat rising in her blood. She didn't shift into a wolf. Instead, her eyes began to glow with a blinding silver light. The ground beneath the bridge began to tremble. "I am not a key," Vespera hissed. "And I am not a possession." The bridge groaned as a massive crack formed in the center. The bridge did not just crack. It screamed. The ancient stone gave way under the pressure of Vespera's raw, untapped power. With a final, deafening roar, the center of the structure vanished into the mist of the waterfall. Vespera felt the stomach-churning sensation of weightlessness. She reached out, her fingers clawing at the empty air. A hand, rough and warm, slammed onto her wrist. "I have you,"
Cassian roared.
He lunged forward, catching her just as the section of stone they were standing on tipped into the abyss. They plummeted together. The cold spray of the waterfall blinded her. The world became a blur of gray water and jagged rocks. They hit the river at the base of the falls like a physical blow. The water was ice cold. It lunged into Vespera's lungs, stealing her breath. She tumbled through the current, her body hitting submerged logs and sharp stones. Just as she felt the darkness closing in, a strong arm wrapped around her waist. Cassian dragged her toward the muddy bank. He collapsed in the shallows, gasping for air. Vespera crawled onto the grass, coughing up river water. Her silver eyes were dimming, returning to their natural dark hue. You're insane," Cassian wheezed. He rolled onto his back. His suit was in rags. A deep gash on his thigh was bleeding heavily into the mud. Vespera looked up at the top of the cliff. The bridge was a broken tooth against the sky. She could see the tiny figures of Silas and his archers. They were already moving toward the forest paths to circle down to the river. "We have to move," Vespera said. She stood up, her legs shaking. She looked at Cassian's leg. The silver arrow from earlier was still lodged in his shoulder, and the leg wound looked deep. "Can you walk?" Cassian tried to stand and immediately fell back down. He gritted his teeth, a low growl of frustration escaping his throat. The silver from that arrow is in my bloodstream. I can't heal. My wolf is suppressed. Vespera looked at the dark woods. She could hear the baying of Silas's hounds. They were being hunted. I'm not leaving you, Vespera said.
She didn't know why she said it.
He had lied to her. He had kept her secret. But Silas was the man who had murdered her mother. Between two monsters, she chose the one who had at least fed her and given her a ring. She grabbed a sturdy branch from the ground and handed it to him as a crutch. She put his arm around her shoulder. There's a cave system 2 miles south, Cassian muttered, his head hanging low. If we can reach the iron deposits, the hounds will lose our scent. Iron masks the blood. They moved through the dense brush. Every step was a battle. Vespera could feel the heat of Cassian's fever through his shirt. He was losing too much blood. Why did you come alone? Vespera asked. She hacked through a thicket of thorns with her silver dagger. You're an alpha. You have an army. Because I knew Silas would use an army as an excuse to kill you, Cassian said. His voice was getting weaker. He needs the white wolf to open the vault, but he only needs your heart. He doesn't need you alive. Vespera stopped. What is in the vault, Cassian? Tell me the truth. No more riddles. Cassian leaned against a tree, his breath coming in ragged gasps. It's the first flame, a source of pure lunar energy. With it, a regular wolf can become a high alpha. They can rule all the packs. Silas wants to use your blood to unlock it and burn the city to the ground. A twig snapped behind them. Vespera spun around, her dagger raised. A shadow moved between the trees. It wasn't a hound. It was a man. Valerius stepped into the moonlight. He looked terrible. His eyes were sunken, and his skin was covered in scratches. He held a heavy tranquilizer rifle leveled at Vespera's chest. Look at the happy couple, Valerius hissed. He didn't sound like a nephew anymore. He sounded like a scavenger. Uncle Cassian, you look pathetic. I thought you were the great alpha. Valerius, Cassian growled, trying to stand straight. Put the gun down. Silas is coming. He will kill you the moment he is Vespera. Silas promised me the throne, Valerius shouted. His finger twitched on the trigger. All I have to do is bring him the girl. He said I could be the one to finish you, uncle.
For all the years you looked down on me.
Vespera took a step forward, shielding Cassian. She felt the silver heat beginning to hum in her palms again. You're a coward, Valerius, Vespera said. You're just trading one master for another. At least Cassian had the balls to marry me himself. Valerius snarled and adjusted his aim. Goodbye, Auntie. Before he could fire, a massive black wolf burst from the shadows to the left. It slammed into Valerius, sending the rifle flying into the river. The wolf didn't bite. It pinned Valerius to the ground and let out a sharp yip. It was Lyra, Vespera's friend from the city. She shifted back into her human form, breathless and messy. Ves, we have to go, Lyra shouted. The whole pack is split. Half are with Silas, half are looking for Cassian. It's a civil war. Vespera looked at the chaos. She looked at Valerius, who was sobbing in the mud. She looked at Cassian, who was fading fast. Lyra, help me get him to the caves, Vespera commanded. They dragged Cassian into the mouth of the iron caves just as the first of Silas's archers reached the riverbank. The red glare of torches lit up the trees. Inside the cave, the air was cold and metallic. Vespera laid Cassian down on a flat rock. She looked at Lyra. Can you heal him? Vespera asked. I'm a beta, Ves. I can't heal a silver wound, Lyra said, shaking her head. Only the white wolf can do that. You have to shift, Ves. You have to use the flame inside you. Vespera looked at her hands. She thought about the bridge. She thought about the girl who had nothing but a brick. I don't know how, Vespera whispered. Cassian reached out and grabbed her hand. His grip was surprisingly strong. Don't think about the power. Think about the debt. You owe me a windshield, Vespera. Don't let me die before you pay it. Vespera felt a tear slip down her cheek. She leaned over him and pressed her forehead to his. She closed her eyes and reached for the silver heat. I'm not paying you back in blood, Vespera whispered. The cave illuminated with a soft, pulsing silver light. The light inside the cave was no longer just a glow. It was a living thing. It pulsed with the rhythm of Vespera's racing heart. She kept her hands pressed against Cassian's chest. The heat was so intense it felt like her skin was melting, but she didn't pull away. "Ves, your eyes," Lyra whispered from the shadows. "They're turning pure white." Vespera didn't hear her. Her mind was no longer inside the cave. As the silver energy flowed out of her and into Cassian, the walls of the cavern seemed to dissolve. She wasn't looking at a dying man anymore. She was looking into his soul. Images flashed before her eyes like a broken film reel. She saw a young Cassian standing over a cradle, looking at a baby with a tuft of dark hair. Vespera. She saw him fighting a group of elders, his face twisted in rage as they demanded the baby be handed over for study. She saw him handing her to a woman in a dark coat, his eyes wet with tears. "Hide her," the memory Cassian whispered. "If they find her, they will turn her into a weapon. Tell her she's a nobody. Let her be human." Vespera felt a gasp catch in her throat. He hadn't been hunting her to control her. He had been hiding her to save her. Every cold word, every secret, had been a layer of armor he built around her existence. The vision shifted. She felt Cassian's current pain. It was a jagged, black sludge of silver poisoning his veins. She reached out with her mind and grabbed the darkness. She pulled it toward herself, absorbing the poison into the light of the white wolf. Back in the cave, Vespera's body arched. A cry of agony escaped her lips. The silver light flared one last time, bright enough to blind, and then vanished. Vespera fell back against the cold stone floor. Her breathing was shallow. Her hands were covered in a strange, shimmering gray soot, the remains of the silver poison. Cassian's eyes snapped open. He sat up with a violent jerk, taking a deep, rattling breath. The wound on his leg was gone. The gash on his shoulder had closed into a thin, white scar. He looked at his hands, then at Vespera. "You took it," Cassian whispered. He crawled to her side and gathered her into his arms. "You fool. You took the silver into yourself." Vespera looked up at him. She saw the truth now. Not the truth Silas told, or the truth Valerius believed. She saw the man who had traded his own happiness to give her a chance at a normal life. "I saw it," Vespera croaked. "I saw you give me away." Cassian froze. He leaned his forehead against hers.
"I'm sorry."
"I wanted you to stay a girl. I didn't want you to become a queen in a world of monsters." "Too late," Vespera said. She tried to smile, but her vision was blurring. "I think I'm the biggest monster in the room now." A low, vibrating hum echoed through the cave. It wasn't a sound. It was a feeling in their bones. "The hounds," Lyra hissed, pointing toward the cave entrance. "They're at the iron deposits." "The iron didn't work, Cassian. They have a high tracker with them." Cassian stood up. He looked different now. His power had returned, but it was amplified. Sparks of Vespera's silver energy flickered in his amber eyes. The bond was complete. They weren't just husband and wife by law. They were two halves of one soul. "He's not after our scent," Cassian said, his voice dropping an octave. "He's tracking the white wolf's energy." Vespera's shift was too powerful. It lit up the mountain like a flare. He reached down and picked up Vespera's silver dagger. He handed it back to her. "Can you stand?"
Cassian asked.
Vespera took his hand. She felt a surge of strength flow from him back to her. The soot on her hands vanished. She stood tall, her white leather tunic glowing faintly in the dark. "I can do more than stand," Vespera said. They walked toward the cave entrance. Outside, the forest was alive with the glow of 100 torches. Silas stood at the front of the line. He held a massive silver crossbow. Next to him, Valerius was tied to a tree, his face bruised and bloody. Silas had no use for failures. "Come out, Vespera," Silas shouted. "The Alpha is dead. You have no protector. Come with me, and I will show you the flame." Vespera stepped out of the cave first. She didn't hide. She stood on a rock ledge, looking down at the army of rebels and traitors. "The Alpha isn't dead," Vespera's voice rang out, amplified by the power in her blood. "And I don't need a protector." Cassian stepped out behind her. He let out a roar that shook the trees, knocking several archers off their feet. Silas looked at Cassian's healed wounds. He looked at the silver light dancing between the two of them. His face twisted in a mask of pure hatred. "Kill them both," Silas screamed. "Bring me the heart of the girl." A rain of arrows whistled through the air. The world slowed to a crawl. Vespera watched as the 100 silver arrows left their bows. They hummed through the air, their jagged tips aimed directly at her chest and Cassian's throat. She could see the feathers of the arrows spinning. She could see the flicker of the torchlight reflecting off the metal. Beside her, Cassian lunged forward to shield her with his body.
He was too slow.
Even an alpha could not outrun a wall of silver. Vespera didn't think. She didn't plan. She simply reached out with both hands and screamed a single word. "Stop." A shockwave of silver light exploded from her palms. It hit the air like a physical wall. The arrows didn't just fall. They froze. 100 shafts of wood and silver hung suspended in midair, trembling against an invisible barrier of energy. The rebels on the ground gasped. Silas dropped his crossbow, his eyes widening in terror. "She's controlling the air itself," someone whispered. Vespera's hands shook. The effort felt like she was holding back a tidal wave. Her nose began to bleed, a single drop of crimson falling onto her white tunic. She swept her arms to the side. The arrows redirected. They didn't hit the rebels, but they slammed into the ground at their feet, forming a literal fence of silver between the two sides. "The next ones go through your hearts," Vespera shouted. Her voice was amplified by the wind. "Drop your weapons." The rebels looked at each other. They looked at the white-haired girl, who looked like a goddess of war. One by one, they dropped their bows and spears. They didn't want to fight a legend. "Cowards!" Silas screamed. He grabbed a torch from a nearby guard and ran toward the base of the cliff. "If you won't kill her, I'll burn this mountain to the ground." He tossed the torch into a pile of dry brush that had been soaked in oil. In an instant, a wall of fire erupted. The mountain air, thick with pine resin, caught like gasoline. The path to the cave was cut off by a roaring inferno. "We have to jump," Cassian said. He grabbed Vespera's hand. "Jump where?" Vespera asked, looking at the fire below. "We'll burn." "To the river," Cassian said. He looked her in the eye. "Trust the bond, Vespera. We are the flame and the flood." They ran together. They didn't wait for Silas to reload. They leaped from the ledge, two figures silhouetted against the orange fire. As they fell, Vespera felt the silver energy wrap around them like a cocoon. They didn't hit the water with a splash. They hit with a burst of steam. The river water rose up to meet them, guided by the same power that had stopped the arrows. They surfaced 100 yards downstream, near the edge of the city. The sky was turning a bruised purple. The fire on the mountain was still visible, a glowing wound in the dark. "We have to get to the vault," Cassian said, pulling himself onto the docks of the city. He was shivering, but his eyes were sharp. "Silas knows the mountain is lost. He'll head straight for the Vane Tower. The entrance to the first flame is in the basement." Vespera looked at the city skyline. Vane Tower stood in the center, a needle of glass and steel. It was where her journey had begun. It was where she had broken the windshield. "How do we get through the city?" Vespera asked. "The police, the pack guards, they think I'm a criminal." A black car roared down the street and screeched to a halt in front of them. The door swung open. Valerius was behind the wheel. He looked terrified. His face was covered in soot, and his arm was in a makeshift sling. "Get in," Valerius said. Cassian growled, his claws extending. "You have 5 seconds to explain why I shouldn't tear your throat out, Valerius." "Silas left me to die in the fire," Valerius shouted, tears streaming down his face. "He said I was a useless pup. I was wrong, uncle. I was wrong about everything. He's at the tower. He has Octavia and the council elders. He's going to sacrifice them to open the door." Vespera looked at the boy who had once broken her heart. He looked small. He looked human. Get in the car, Cassian, Vespera said. Vespera, he betrayed us, Cassian warned. And now he's the only one who can get us past the security gates without a fight, Vespera said. She climbed into the passenger seat. Move, Valerius. If you slow down, I'll let my husband eat you. The car sped toward the center of the city. Valerius drove like a madman, weaving through traffic and blowing through red lights. Why did he say he needed a sacrifice? Vespera asked. I thought I was the key. You are the key, Valerius said, his voice trembling. But the vault has a bloodlock. It needs the blood of a high alpha to taste the lock before the white wolf can turn it. Silas thinks if he kills enough Vane elders, the door will think he's one of us. Vespera looked at her hands. The silver light was still humming under her skin. He's going to kill them for nothing, Vespera said. The lock won't open for a murderer. They reached the Vane Tower. The plaza was empty. The glass doors were shattered. A trail of blood led into the lobby. Cassian stepped out of the car and looked at the top floor. The lights were flickering. The air felt heavy with the scent of ozone and death. This ends tonight, Cassian said. The lobby of Vane Tower was a tomb. The marble floors were smeared with black boot prints and the scent of gunpowder. Vespera stepped over a fallen guard, her heart hammering against her ribs. She didn't feel like the orphan girl who had broken a windshield anymore. She felt like a storm held inside a human skin. The elevators are dead, Valerius whispered. He pointed toward the service stairs. He took them to the sub-basement. The vault is built into the bedrock of the city. Cassian grabbed a discarded tactical vest and pulled it on. He looked at Vespera, his eyes glowing with a fierce, protective light. Stay behind me. If he opens that door, the energy release will be enough to level this block. They descended into the dark. The air grew colder and thicker with every floor they dropped. Finally, they reached the lowest level. A massive circular door made of ancient bronze and modern steel stood at the end of the hall. It was covered in glowing runes that pulsed like a heartbeat. Silas stood before the door. He was no longer the calm, gray-eyed man. He looked feral. He held a jagged obsidian knife to Octavia's throat. 6 elders of the Vane pack were tied to the pillars nearby, their faces bruised and bloody. You're late, Alpha, Silas shouted. He didn't look at Cassian. He looked at Vespera. The White Queen has arrived to open her palace. Let them go, Silas, Vespera said. She stepped into the light. Her white hair shimmered with silver sparks. The bloodlock won't open for you. You aren't a Vane. You're just a parasite. Silas laughed. It was a dry, hollow sound. I don't need to be a Vane. I just need their blood to prime the pump. And I have plenty of that. He sliced Octavia's arm. She screamed as her blood hit the bronze door. The runes turned a sickly, dark red. The ground beneath them began to groan.
Now,
Cassian roared. He lunged at Silas, his claws extending. At the same time, Valerius dove for the elders, trying to cut their ropes. Vespera focused all her will on the door. She could feel the first flame behind it. It was a roar of white-hot power that wanted to be free. Silas dropped Octavia and met Cassian's charge. They collided like 2 freight trains. Silas was fast, but Cassian was fueled by the bond. Every strike Cassian landed was backed by Vespera's silver light. Vespera, the lock, Cassian shouted as he pinned Silas against a pillar. It's rejecting the blood. It's going to explode. The door wasn't opening. It was vibrating. Small cracks began to appear in the bronze. The dark red blood was bubbling. The energy was backing up, unable to find a way out. Vespera ran to the door. She ignored the heat. She ignored the screams of the fighting men. She placed both her palms against the center of the bronze circle. I am Vespera Vane, she whispered. Daughter of Valera. True blood of the silverback. The dark red blood was instantly incinerated by a burst of pure silver light. The runes changed from red to a brilliant, blinding white. The heavy gears inside the door began to turn with a sound like grinding mountains. The vault swung open. A pillar of white fire erupted from the center of the room. It didn't burn. It sang. It was the purest lunar energy on Earth. Vespera felt it rush into her, filling the empty spaces in her soul. Silas threw Cassian aside and ran toward the flame. "It's mine. The power of the High Alpha is mine." He reached out to grab the center of the fire.
No.
Vespera screamed. The moment Silas's hand touched the flame, the fire turned black. The energy didn't empower him. It judged him. Silas's eyes turned to ash. He didn't even have time to scream before he was vaporized into a cloud of gray dust. The room went silent. The black fire vanished, leaving only the steady, warm glow of the first flame. Vespera stood in the center of the vault. Her clothes were scorched, and her skin was glowing. She looked at the elders. She looked at Octavia. Finally, she looked at Cassian. He was on his knees, breathing hard. He looked at her with awe. "The queen is home," Cassian whispered. Vespera walked out of the vault and offered him her hand. She didn't look at the crown or the power. She looked at the man who had seen her at her worst and stayed. "I think you still owe me a new life," Vespera said. Cassian stood up and pulled her into a firm, protective embrace. "I think we can build one together."